Thank you all for coming today. So this is going to be very interactive, and the more you participate and interact, the better. Okay, so this is totally for you. There's nothing silly any of us can say. This is for us. This is time for us to be kind to ourselves and nurturing, and we're just going to explore together. Okay, so imagine you have no head, you just have a belly, a gut, and speak spontaneously. When you want to speak, you have the, as Ben said, the hand raised feature. Okay. So we're just going to explore together, kind of like children. Right. So if any of you did the last class, I love the expression. It's a psychologist that just used recently, that when we're children, we have a lantern mind, and when we're adults, we have the spotlight mind. So what we're going to try and do is use our lantern mind as much as possible. So, and for that, we just engage our curiosity and we just explore. So this is called freedom of thought. I just wonder what brought you here. So can some of you tell me what brought you to this? Anybody? Can you put that, use the little, that's it. Mira.
I've been in Terry Ann's class that she does on Tuesdays, and we do a lot of not investigating, but looking for what's behind a lot of our behaviors and beliefs and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm here just because I want to know more.
Yeah, but what are you really here for? So my question is different, huh? It's not the dynamics that brought you here. It's really what you are wanting for yourself. What brought you here for yourself?
Well, for me, there's something inside of me that just wants to connect or to know or to be something.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
Yes, the reason I joined is because I want to experience more space.
More space? In what way do you mean?
Just overall in my life, in my body, for instance. Yes.
Okay. Carolyn?
Aloha, my name is Bevan.
Oh, Bevan, sorry.
Yeah. Hi, I'm here today out of curiosity for the connections and ways that our inner child relates to one another and relates to our bodies and communicates through it.
Okay, thank you. Susan?
The word freedom appealed to me, and just inside my body to not have so much restriction. That's what I'm hoping this will help with.
Okay, nothing too big then. Okay,
No.
Space, freedom. All right, and just make notes. Nova?
Me, it's just purely curiosity. Purely curiosity, nothing else.
If you've come with curiosity, then you're in the right place. Yes, Terry. Thank you, Nova.
I thought I knew what freedom of thought was when you first brought it up. And then I started exploring it. I started talking to my husband, and I realized I have no idea what freedom of thought is. And the moment I create a parameter of what a free thought is, obviously it's limited. So I keep finding a limitation to my freedom of thinking. And I'm wondering if I ever think freely or have freedom of thought. So that kind of, boggling me a bit. Thank you.
Yeah, so that was what I wondered, if that title would trigger any question, because there's so many things, you know, we use words so glibly, don't we? But when it comes to it and we start thinking, it's like, what the heck is that? Oh, Maya, thank you, T. Can't hear you. You're muted. It's a little mic down the left.
Got it now?
Mhm.
That reminded me of a journey that I'm on right now, which is to explore and reveal a shadowed aspect of myself that is still a quandary to me. Like, am I actually expressing freely and living freely? And I haven't seen Esther in a long time. I'm here under my nom de plume, but this is Carolyn Sorensen. So,
Oh,
um,
nice to see you. No, the plume.
thank you for sharing today.
Oh, thank you all for being here. Lovely to see you. Thank you. Okay, so let's wear my glasses. Rigetsu, how do you pronounce your name? Kathy.
Rigetsu Kathy, just Kathy's fine. I'm here because I do meditation as well, and I realize how my thoughts are just, and beliefs drag me around. So I'm not free. I think that I might be, but then if I really start looking and inquiring deeply, I realize I'm just being, for the most part, dragged around. And there isn't that freedom. And those thoughts and belief patterns are impeding my relationships and how I'm expressing myself. And so, yeah, I'm here out of curiosity.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you, Kathy. Miranda.
Yeah, so for me, this idea of freedom of thought really somehow in my mind implies if I had freedom of thought, I would have choice. Like I can choose when I don't want to think something or when I do want to think something instead of being dragged around. Yeah, so this freedom being a sense of being able to choose what I want to think when I want to, and like immediately being aware when something pops up that I don't want to think and being like, oh no, I don't want that. So freedom was tied to choice for me. So I was kind of interested in exploring that.
It seems strongly tied, huh? Yes. Okay. So what is freedom of thought? What is that? What does it mean for you? So what I'll do is I have a document, so you don't go up in your heads, because I'd rather you just stay lower. I will just write down what you say, okay? And you can, I'll give you that afterwards. So let's just explore. Something I read before we started. It was from, actually, I'm going to make a detour. Do you mind before we go where? I was sitting in a class one time with an Englishman, and he goes, "Are you ever going to get to the point?" So, all right. So I was sitting and I read this from Ramana Maharshi. And so often, you know, in the seeking process and the spiritual process, you know, we hear the words of surrender. And he said, surrender can take effect only when done with full knowledge. Such knowledge comes after inquiry. It ends in surrender. So what I thought today in part is to explore freedom of thought, but as it pertains to self-inquiry. So those are two terms that we think we have ideas about, but I thought together exploring, you know, when we're a big group like this, the benefit is that we catalyze each other's thinkings in out-of-the-box ways. So we're not looking for our ideas we already know about. So discard those. We're looking for something we've never found before. Okay, so when you're looking, don't go immediately for your pat answers. See if something else is wanting to come up. This is why I'm suggesting, imagine you have no head and just come from your gut, okay? And nothing is silly and none of us are judging. So we're just gonna say whatever comes. All right, so freedom of thought. So
Esther, Emily has her hand up in the upper left-hand corner.
really?
Emily.
Oh, but if I'm not clicked on the page, I don't see that. Oh,
okay.
Really? I don't see a hand up.
Yeah. Anyway, Emily, would you like to? Oh, she did write something in the chat. She said her connection is cutting in and out.
Yeah, I can't really help connections. Okay. All right.
Would you like me to speak? I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Oh, now
Yes,
we can hear you.
Emily?
Okay, I'll just say a little bit with the original question in terms. Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, so this original question, what
Okay.
is freedom of thought?
It was
Or why you're here?
your question about what drew me, and it was in fact the title.
Mm-hmm.
It was the title, and also the reflections on that in terms of the inner journey, and also what that means in the outer world and how to connect those two. So, thank you.
Okay. And that's an interesting question, how to connect those two. Yeah. So we tend as adults to ask how and why questions, very habitually. Like I'll go on Google, I'll go, how good are potato chips for me? Like I want them to tell me they're good. So I'll go, how, assuming they already are, so I'll get an answer I want. But when we begin questions with a how, it's an assumption, yes? So how do those two connect? Assumes they're disconnected in some way, yeah? So we'll look at our question. So the first question is, what is freedom of thought? So for our answers in Breakthrough, what we do, we never give answers that are longer than 8 words. And the reason for this is not to make it all heady. It does the opposite. It actually calms the nervous system. So you're going to have to let your thoughts just come spontaneously. But if you count them and they're more than 8, then try and rearrange your words. So what that does, it gives the mind some practical action to take that stops all the chatter and gets it to calm down. Okay, it might all seem a little strange, but once we're underway, you can explore it. So what is freedom of thought? First things that come to you. And if you can include yourself in the answer, that would be good. Michael.
Freedom of thought is unconditioned thinking, but I'm missing a pronoun.
All right, so what we'll do to make it simpler is I'll begin the sentence with freedom of thought and you just fill in the gaps. So you have a little more leeway. Okay, so freedom of thought is unconditioned thinking.
Yes.
Okay. Keep on going.
My freedom of thought.
I don't mean you have to keep on going. So what we'll do for this, let's see if it works without putting hands up. No, maybe not. No, last time it didn't. You have another one, Michael?
No, I'm just trying to lower my hand, sorry.
Excuse me a second. Yes. I'm sorry. So tell me your next one, Carol. You're muted.
I can think about anything, anytime.
Okay. Freedom of thought is thinking about anything, anytime. That sounds pretty okay, doesn't it? Mira?
Freedom of thought is my peace.
What does that mean? So pretend I'm 6 years old and I'm asking you, what is freedom of thought? I'm 6 years old and you're telling me, what is freedom of thought?
When there's no conflict. When it's peaceful.
Freedom of thought is, well, why is it peaceful? When there's no thinking.
Because there's no conflict. There's just, it's silent, it's quiet.
So I'm 6 years old. This is your answer to me? I'm a little confused. Freedom of thought is?
When I do not worry.
Okay. When I do not worry. Thank you. Ben?
Freedom of thought means I do not censor my thoughts. And means I do not judge my thoughts.
Thank you, Ben. Nova? Can't hear you.
Okay, freedom of thought is not being afraid of what you're saying. You're not afraid. You're not. You're just free.
Is not being afraid of what I am saying. Okay.
Of what you're thinking, not being judged.
Thank you. Caroline?
Freedom of thought is thinking does not limit me.
Thinking that does not limit me.
Yes. Or my thinking does not limit me.
Okay.
Yeah, thinking that does not limit me. That's,
thinking
that does not limit me.
Okay, so freedom of thought is, and then you will finish the sentence. Yes, thinking that does not limit me. Sharon?
Thinking without the parameters of right and wrong.
Okay, I'm 6 years old. Can you make that a little simpler for me?
Oh dear.
I know. So this is it. We're using very simple language. Otherwise, we're up in our heads, you know? So you think for a moment and put your hand up again when you've got the thought. But don't look up there and think. Look into your gut.
Oh, that's what I do. Okay.
I know. So no head, just a gut. Yeah, and you're not trying to find anything, incredibly intelligent. It doesn't matter. We're trying to find something simple. And I'm only 6, so it's got to be clear for me, yes? I'm bright 6-year-old, but clear. Okay, so you think and come back. Savannah?
Freedom of thought means no one has control.
When nobody has control over me?
Yeah.
But I don't understand. I'm 6 years old, remember, and you're telling me freedom of thought means nobody has control over me. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. All right. V? I don't know who that is.
Yeah, sorry, my name's Victoria.
Victoria. Hi.
Hi. Freedom of thought to me is creative, imaginative thinking.
Okay. Thank you. I've forgotten your name now because you've got a different one written. Brianna. No, and you're muted.
Aloha, Bevan here.
Bevan. Oh, Bevan. Okay. Freedom of thought is.
The first thing that came to me when I quieted my thoughts was being free of thought means free of it.
All right. Freedom of thought
No
is
longer
being.
pursuing you.
Ah, so my thoughts stop pursuing me.
And I'm ready to receive.
Ah. Receive what?
Whatever comes, the messages from within.
Oh, okay, well, that's clear. Leslie?
Freedom of thought is breaking the old records.
But what is it?
The old grooves, my thoughts are stuck in these grooves, and it's just breaking them and getting out of those grooves.
Ah, okay, so freedom of thought is thinking that is not stuck?
Yes.
Crystal.
Thank you. Freedom of thought means not believing my thoughts.
Can you, somebody, Ben, is making a lot of noise. Okay, anybody else? Oh, yes. Judith. You had another one?
Freedom of thought is an endless space of opportunities.
So the question is, what is freedom of thought? Not what you achieve from it, not what you get, not what happens if you have it. It's asking, what is freedom of thought? See, different question. So it's not what comes from freedom of thought. It's like, what is it exactly? What is the dynamic of it? You understand?
Yes, but I have no other explanation.
Okay, no worries. Okay. Next one, Sharon? No.
Yeah, that's okay. Receiving thoughts without fear.
Okay.
Receiving ideas without fear.
Charlotte.
It is I choose what I want to think about.
Right. Karen. Is, yeah.
Your feelings.
Can't hear you.
Pure feelings.
Pure feelings, okay. So when I have pure feelings, or when there are pure feelings, what is freedom of thought?
Depends on if you want a 6-year-old or a
6-year-old.
6-year-old.
What is freedom?
My feelings are free, therefore my thoughts are genuine. Because they come from me.
Is when my, so it's when my thoughts are genuine. Yes? Yes. Okay, JG? Sorry, Michael?
Freedom of thought is choice not to think.
Okay.
Yeah.
JG?
Freedom of thought is being present, being who you are.
Okay. Lisa?
freedom of thought is my natural way.
Yeah, sorry, just a second. Ben, can you just take it for a second? What do you mean?
Okay, thanks. Sorry, can you repeat that? Let me open up my own document here so I can just pick up where Esther read off. So as Esther mentioned, you're not going to be, you don't need to take notes. So she's transcribing all the answers. You'll receive the transcript of all these answers afterwards. Okay. So whoever just spoke, can you repeat what you just said? Freedom of thought is?
My natural way.
My natural way. Freedom of thought is my natural way. My natural way of what? Way of who's speaking right now?
I guess it's of thinking.
Way of thinking. Okay. So that's an interesting freedom of thought and natural way of thinking. Okay. Great. Thank you. Next, who is JG44?
Freeing thoughts is being present and being who you are.
Okay, so when you're giving your answers, please make the answers personal to you. So include yourself in the answers. So you'll always use a personal pronoun of some kind: I, me, my, mine. So JG, what's your name, or do you prefer just to go by JG? Jane. So how can you restate that, including yourself in the answer somehow?
When I
freedom of thought
freedom of thought occurs when I'm being present, being who I am, letting go of the past.
Is when I am present, is when freedom of thought is being who I am. Is being who I am. So freedom of thought is when I am present. Freedom of thought is being who I am. Freedom of thought is
when I let go of the past and not judge myself. When I let go of the past and not compare or judge.
Is when I do not compare. Is when I do not judge. Okay. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Ben, very much. So yeah. Choice not to think is being who I am, is when I do not compare, is when I do not judge. What other did I miss?
Is being when I let go of the past.
Okay. All right. So just for a moment, close your eyes. All right, and I'll just read them to you, what we have so far. Huh? Oh, there are a few more of you, but let's just go with what we have so far, yeah? All right. Freedom of thought is unconditioned thinking. Thinking about anything at any time. Freedom of thought is when I don't worry and don't censor my thoughts. It's when I don't judge my thoughts. Freedom of thought is not being afraid of what I'm saying. Thinking that doesn't limit me. Freedom of thought is when nobody has control over me. It's creative, imaginative thinking. Being free of thought. My thoughts stop pursuing me when I'm ready to receive messages from within. Thinking that is not stuck. Freedom of thoughts when I do not believe my thoughts. Endless space of opportunities. Receiving thoughts without fear. I choose what I want to think about. When my thoughts are genuine, choice not to think is being who I am, Freedom of thoughts is when I do not compare, is when I do not judge. Ben, can you take the few hands that are up and do those?
Sure. So Jane, did you have something else you want to share? Your hand is still up. Okay. So just remember, please.
Sorry, Ben, just mute Esther,
Yeah.
please.
Yep. So when you, so just remember after you share what you want to share, just please remember to lower your hand so that the cue can move forward. All right. So Sherry, I don't know which, there are a lot of Sherrys out there. Sherry, what's freedom of thought?
Is when I let myself off the hook and I accept all of my thoughts.
Did you get that, Esther? Is when I let myself off the hook is when I accept all of my thoughts. Thanks, Sherry.
You'd better keep on going, Ben, for a little bit more. Sorry, I've got that.
Okay. Yep. Where is it? Okay. Oops. Yeah, there we go. Okie dokie. Susan, what is freedom of thought?
Freedom of thought is when I have no agenda.
Thank you. When I have no agenda. Monica.
I need some help with the sentence, Ben, okay? I don't know
Okay.
which one makes I don't know which one makes sense. Freedom of thought is being free of my illusions? Or is it freedom of thought is I am free of illusions? So those are two very different sentences.
Yeah, so remember, as Esther said in the beginning of this part, don't think about it so much, right? So the answers are just coming spontaneously from your gut, and
Right.
approach
So freedom of
the
thought
answers.
is I am free of my illusions.
Thank you. Okay. So let's just stop here for a moment, shall we? And I'm sorry, I have to get up and down. Right.
Do you want me to read any of those back to you, Esther? You're okay.
Yeah, just give me the few. Yes, sorry.
Is when I let myself off the hook, is when I accept all of my thoughts, is when I have no agenda, is being free of my illusions, means I am free of my illusions.
Okay. So a lot of what we've written here seems to be we want to get rid of something. Do you get that sense that something needs to be gotten rid of before we are free? Do you have that feeling? Mm-hmm. How many of you feel like you are seekers, that you're in some spiritual process? In some way, probably everybody is, huh? On some level, yes. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, the idea is there's something I have to get rid of before whatever we think awakening is, huh? Mm-hmm. So we're beginning our search from a place of there's something wrong. Yeah. not just there's something wrong. We're beginning our search from a place of there's something wrong with me. So when we're really little, isn't it? And we hear things like, what do you want to be when you grow up? It can just be the worst thing to say to a little child. Huh? Like, but do I have to be anything else? Who do I have to be? As if I have to be someone. So we're already given this little seed is sown, and then more and more seeds about needing to be different than we are, and needing to gain and attain and achieve to be better. Yes. And then, of course, the more we struggle, in the end, we go on a spiritual pathway, because then we want to be super better and perfect, and then we just get enlightened. Yes. So the ultimate goal. Yes, but it's all about I'm coming from a place of I lack, I'm not good enough. Yes. So when Ramana Maharshi says surrender can take effect only when done with full knowledge. Such knowledge comes after inquiry. It ends in surrender. So whatever kind of spiritual pathway on, you may be familiar with the idea of inquiry, but most of us, we don't really know what that means. Right? Even people who say, I'm doing self-inquiry. So rather than doing a list and making it laborious and putting hands up, just for a moment, just blurt out and see if that'll work for a second. What does self-inquiry mean to you? Anybody?
Unlearning.
Unlearning? Mm-hmm.
Reflection.
Reflection.
Surrender.
Exploration.
Getting to know myself.
Seeing myself.
Surprise.
Feeling.
Questioning.
Loving myself.
We won't do too many without hands up, because I know then it will. Somebody said something. One more.
I said loving myself.
Oh.
Curiosity.
So for a 6-year-old, this is all really confusing to me. What is self-inquiry? So the one that stands out to me is questioning. That kind of goes together with inquiry, yes? So unlearning, reflection, surrender, exploration, getting to know myself, seeing myself, surprise, feeling, questioning, listening, loving myself, curiosity. So if self-inquiry is about questioning, what are we questioning? What are we asking questions about in self-inquiry? What do you think, Crystal?
My reactions.
My reactions.
Who am I?
Okay, we've got doing hands up again now because it worked. Who am I? Okay, Michael.
Finding out who I am. So it's the same thing. Sorry.
Finding out who I am. Kathy. Oh, Mary.
My beliefs and my habits.
Okay. So who am I? How do we go about questioning that? So when we ask the question, who am I? It signifies I have no idea, yes? Right. So, but all we know for sure is I am, yes? This we experience, this we know. So if we know I exist, the question, who am I? What is it really asking? If I know with no doubt I exist, I've had that experience my entire waking life, I exist. So I know I exist, but who am I? When I ask that, what might I be looking for? What does my mind immediately look for if I ask that question? JG.
I'm wondering who I'm not, perhaps.
That would make sense, yes, doesn't it? Bevan. No, she's gone off. Sharon.
Yes. Can I speak?
What?
Or shall I wait? Okay.
Okay.
Sharon, I see.
What makes me important?
Oh.
What makes me important or different?
Yes. So when you ask that question, do you think there's an assumption in it already? Right.
That I am
what,
important.
So if you, yes. So when you ask a question, a real question needs to be without an assumption. So children are really good at that because everything's fresh and new to them. So they don't ask from the place of, I know something. Yes. So for a moment, if we come back to freedom of thought, this idea of freedom of thought, might it be what inhibits freedom of thought, the idea I know something? Do you think? Why might that inhibit freedom of thought? I know something. Michael?
That limits me only to what I know, and that assumes I'm right.
Yes. Carolyn, I cannot remember. Bevan. Okay, Bevan.
So I had a bit of a question because it's slightly confusing. You had said lantern thinking is a child's way of thinking, and then the more adult way is spotlight thinking. And I thought that our perception was to be expanded into lantern thinking, in which, if that is the case, when I put myself in the position of a 6-year-old and I ask myself these questions, I am no longer coming from the question of, why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? I'm literally just in the mode of experiencing and ready to explore and receive whatever information comes into my field, because I'm no longer in the assumption that I have the awareness of everything. It's all coming to me to experience.
And the question? Yes, go on.
So who I am, was that the question?
When we ask who am I, we're coming from a place of what? So a little child doesn't ask, who am I?
It's only exploration. It's only to receive and experience all that is. I want to play.
That's the little child. That's the little child. Yes. So and so as adults, what has changed? That's the question. What has changed, and why are we asking, who am I?
Okay. The change that I've experienced is the attachment of expectation. The attachment of the idea that there is an answer, that there's a concrete answer, when we can release that assumption.
Okay. And obviously we can't, because otherwise we would. Yes? Gillian. Yes, makes sense.
Self-inquiry happened for me when I was ready to address my self-righteousness. To me, that was kind of a pivotal experience. Do you want me to, I don't know, are you looking for an 8-sentence? Because you were asking what is self-inquiry?
I've forgotten what the question was.
The question was, who am I? I mean,
We were kind of talking
I
about
thought it was, so you missed a bit.
Okay, so who am I? To me, that's the absence.
Why do we
of
ask
self-
that question? Why do we ask that question?
I asked that question because I was wanting to address my self-righteousness.
Okay, all right. Nova.
Why do we ask questions like who am I? Maybe you're as a child you want approval. That's it. As a child you want approval, you want to please the people around you. That's it.
Michael. Thank you, Nova. Michael.
yeah, I got a couple. What makes me tick? I want to know. And what am I about? If I don't know what I'm about, how do I know what anyone or anything else is about?
Yes. Okay. Savannah.
I'm on the who am I and why do I ask that is I think I need to identify as something.
Uh-huh. Yes. Okay. As something or somebody, huh? Yeah. So freedom of thinking. Might freedom of thinking be the ability to use our mind in a way that is helpful to us? So if you had freedom of thinking, not assuming we even know what it is, if you had freedom of thought, what would change in your life? Let's ask that. Michael. So don't
Thinking
think
would
about
not be a, pardon?
No, I was just telling them, don't go up in your head thinking.
Yeah. Thinking would not be a problem.
Okay, so if I had freedom of thought, okay, what in my life would change? Okay, if I had freedom of thought, nothing would be a problem.
Yeah, nothing about thinking would be an issue.
So why is it an issue?
Because I expect it to be a certain way or to go a certain way. And I try to control it so it will, but that makes it worse. So
Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. So the other day I was working with a lady and I said, so, in BreakThrough, what we do is we use the mind to cut through the confused, complicated mind that's full of expectations and judgments, and this is how it is, and assumptions. We use the mind to cut through that. And she stopped for me and she said, you can do that? You can use the mind to cut through the mind? Yes. So to me, this is how I see freedom of thought. So freedom of thought, first and foremost, is exploring how my mind works the way it does. Yes. So first thing in my exploration of my mind was, that it has a mind of its own for a start. Yes. But I also realized when I was a little child that as much as I had some good things that I was taught, but there were a lot of things I was learning from grown-ups and from my society that I already as a little child couldn't understand or didn't agree with. Yes. But as I grew older, I realized that I'd taken them on board and I was living according to them and I was following those rules. And so, like all of us, I started to develop my own ways of thinking that were often radically opposed to what I'd been taught as a little child. But as I got older, I got to see that just because I rebelled against what I was taught as a child, it didn't get rid of those teachings, because they came from important people in my life, whether I liked them or not, or they were my first reflections, my parents, my grandparents. And so what I ended up with was just a big argument in my mind, yes? How I thought things should be, how my parents thought things should be. So this is basically how our minds function, yes? It's one big argument of hand-me-down thinking that we receive from generation to generation to generation. And then we embellish on it even more. Some thoughts we agree with and we make them even stronger, and others we rebel against. And so we have this big confusion of hand-me-down thinking that, as a few of you have said, leads us around by the throat. Yes. So when we think of freedom of thought, it's like, how can we even come about that? How do we find some aspect of our mind that's able to cut through all of that, all of this stuff that controls us? And yet now and then you do have very clear thoughts, don't you? Sometimes you have thoughts that are very practical and they seem to, when does that happen in your life? When do you notice that suddenly that mind that's pulling you around on a leash, when do you suddenly notice that something else clicks in and you function very practically and things seem to flow? Do you notice times in your lives when that happens? When is that, Michael?
When I'm in the so-called zone and I just forget about everything and it just happens to me, or ideas just come to me, or
Right.
solutions.
So what happens that suddenly you find yourself in the zone?
It's like I'm not really thinking about anything. I don't have any goal or anything.
And is there something that catalyzes those moments?
Maybe, but I'm not sure.
So you don't manufacture going into the zone, it just happens, yes?
It just, I sink into it, yeah.
But if you try and think about some of those times, what shift might have happened before they kick in?
I just relax.
You're relaxed?
Usually in the shower. Yeah.
Okay.
So I let go, I relax, kind of. I'm not trying to do anything. Yeah.
Right. So it's not contrived.
Yeah, it's just the natural me, whatever that is. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Kathy?
Yeah, I agree with Michael, what Michael said. When all thoughts just seem to drop away and you're just a clear, everything is clear, and but you're not thinking about doing anything, but action is happening, and it's right action, what needs to happen at that time. But there's no thought dragging you around and making you judge one way or another. It's just, there's no thought.
Or there's thought, but it's practical and just.
But it doesn't feel like a real thought. You're not attached to anything. If there's a thought, it's so fleeting because you're just in the middle of action. You're not getting attached to it in any way.
Yes, really different, isn't it? So when the thinking happens and we're not attached to it, it can be very practical and very, yes. So what is it that keeps us attached to the thinking? So freedom of thought is something that seems so rare and just we get glimpses of. So let's look at what might it be that keeps us attached to the thinking, identified to the thinking. You know, this is a clever thought. Oh, that's a really stupid thought. Oh, I can't believe I'm thinking like that. Yes, so when we're attached, we have all kinds of commentaries about the thinking. So what's the difference? How do we get unattached from thinking? Kathy.
I think it's when we can get to a place, and that requires a lot of practice, I think, and recognition of every thought that's coming into our head, and just an inquiry on each of those thoughts.
But it sounds like an effort. Yes?
It takes
sounds like an effort.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that effort does pay off if you can just keep doing it, I think. And without judging yourself or beating yourself up, just questioning everything all the time.
Right. Questioning. Mm-hmm. Leslie?
Our desires control our thought. We attach to our thoughts when they're driven by our desires and our needs, what we think we need. We need to get out the way of our thoughts. And you'll only do that when you're very quiet and you've got rid of your monkey mind.
Right. Again, this idea we have to get rid of something. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. So again, something's wrong. So we get those glimpses when we go into what we call the zone. But in general, the idea I have to sit, I have to meditate. And when we meditate, we think in terms of calming the mind and contriving something. So in breakthrough, we have, it's a different way really to that. We begin from the place of, you know, my mind's a mess. And it controls me a lot of the time. It's like a little hand-me-down puppy that has gone from, you know, these owners to these owners, and nobody's trained it along the way. And now I've got it, and it's just peeing and pooping everywhere, and it's dragging me around on its leash. Yeah, so this is what the mind is like. And then, you know, we think if we kick it or silence it or give it drugs or yank it by the leash, that maybe we can calm it enough, and then we'll have freedom of thought. No? Mm-hmm. So a lot of our ways of going about dealing with the hand-me-down mind are, what would be the quality of that kind of behavior? Is rather judgmental, is unkind. What else?
Forceful.
Susan? It's forceful, yes. It's pushy. It sounds exhausting, no? Mm-hmm. Yes. So might the first way be, might we all agree that we all have a mind that functions like that? Yes, much of the time. Mm-hmm. So how did your first thought ever come about? Do you have any idea? The very, very first thought that ever came to you in life? We don't know how I got there, no? Do you know what your next thought is going to be? Could you sit for a moment and plan your next thought? And would you be guaranteed to get it? No. Yeah. So we don't know how the first thought began. We don't know what our next thought's going to be. And in between, we're trying to control the thinking, or we're feeling controlled by it. So just for a moment, this is your situation. This is our situation. Yes. So just for a moment, be with that. This is my situation. I have a mind that gets full of thoughts. A lot of them are judgmental. A lot of them are telling me, you shouldn't say that, you shouldn't have said that, you're stupid, or you're intelligent, or you have to be this, you have to be like that, you have to achieve this, you're not good enough. So it's a constant, yes, inner conversation happening. So we don't know how the first thought was ever triggered. We don't know what the next thought's going to be. And in between, much of the time, the thinking is harsh. It pushes us around. What do you feel for yourself when you think you're at the mercy of such a mind? What happens? Do you feel some compassion? Yes? Anybody not? Put your hand up. No compassion, Michael?
I feel compassion, and I see many places where I don't have compassion for myself.
Right.
As well, yeah.
So what happens when compassion comes? So it's different. It's not compassion for anything or even for ourselves. There's just a sensation, no? What happens in this sensation of compassion?
It feels like life intensifies.
Mm-hmm. What else? What's your experience in your body when you think, here I am between these thoughts that began without, I don't even know how. I don't know where they're going to go. Thoughts that are going all the time. What is this compassion that comes? What happens? What changes in you? Bevan. Carolyn.
So I had my hand up for a while, if it's okay that I respond to just a little bit of the thread of thought with the first thought. And I do remember my first thought. I wanted to share the moment because I think it's interesting. I was 8 years old, and I had been in a stream of consciousness of some sort till then. But at that moment, a teacher held up a drawing I had made and said, Carolyn made this, and announced it. I raised my hand and said, who is Carolyn? I did not know. I had not drawn that connection that I had an identity. And she said, you are Carolyn. And something completely changed. I had asked it, she said it, and I was in the room then thinking thoughts, never before. And I think it's interesting. I wanted to share that experience if it helps actually hear from a first thought memory. And somehow it validated an identity, and then thoughts began.
Uh-huh. So you didn't think before you were 8 years old?
I don't think so. I have no memory of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. Thank you for letting me share. I just wanted to put that in there.
Thank you. Kathy.
Yeah, for me, when I'm recognizing thoughts and feeling the anguish sometimes that comes up and the compassion towards that, if I can, sometimes that it seems to intensify the whatever it is for a while, but then if I can just sit with it and with compassion for myself and for whatever I'm feeling, then sometimes it takes a long time, but it will start to dissipate that tension, that whatever it is.
Right. So when compassion comes, yeah, the tension is, so it comes, and with it is a tension, letting go of tension. Yes. So for me, when the compassion, all I sense is this experience of gentleness, which is so the antithesis of what the hand-me-down mind seems to be like. Yes, there's nothing gentle about it. It seems very harsh. Mm-hmm. So first of all, in breakthrough, this is where we look to. So we look to first where we're at. What is our situation right now? As it is. Now, if we don't know how the first thought happened, we don't know how the first action happened, but in between it appears we have control, or we should do. Yes. But really, we don't understand anything, do we? We don't know how our thoughts got here. We don't know how they come, if we think a little bit. Yeah. We don't even know how we pick up a cup. We don't know how we do anything if we think just a little bit. So these are some of the explorations that we can do that are so simple, yes? It's like, how do I even raise my finger? How do I think this thought? How does feeling happen? So the most basic, every second things that are happening, going on with us, we don't know how they're happening. And yet much of the time, aren't we trying to control something? And don't we have the idea that we should be able to? Yeah, so probably this is, you're not unfamiliar with any of this kind of talk. Yeah. So what keeps us struggling with the idea that I should be able to? And I should be in charge. Michael.
I can speak for me. I believe my thoughts, and then I'm on the hook.
Yes, of course, we believe them. Because, why?
Because we think the mind is always right.
Isn't it? Yes. Why is that?
It's like a habit we always had, or I always had, to listen to the thoughts and believe them.
Yeah, and
it's a habit.
Perhaps the training first, no?
Yes, I got trained to think a certain way and react a certain way, and then I can't stop it. It just keeps going despite me.
Right. Emily.
For me, it's not wanting to let my thoughts control me. So I try to resist them.
Yes, so let's explore this for a moment then. So the idea, isn't it, that thoughts control me and they drag me around. So how is this possible?
Probably.
How is it possible? Not probably, explore, all of you. How is it that thoughts control us? So some of you probably experienced things like PTSD or, times of great anxiety when your mind wouldn't shut up and you couldn't go to sleep. And the idea, isn't it, totally, that the mind is in charge and control. So how do we experience? How is it possible to experience anything? How does experiencing happen?
Observation.
Observation. Michael?
I experience life through my senses.
Through the senses, yes. So this through the senses. So, and what happens? So what's that dynamic, Michael?
It hones me into my body.
So what do the senses explain to me? So the senses, how does experiencing happen?
I feel, I smell, I taste, I hear.
What?
And that informs me of what's happening.
Yes, so the smell meets the fragrance. Sight meets the image, whether it's an internal image or external, so it could be a thought even. All right, internal image. Yeah, and touch. So the different senses, the subtle and right. So it's senses meeting their objects. Yes, basically. This is how experiencing happens. Yes. So what comes first, senses or the objects?
The senses do.
Explain.
A sense will stimulate a memory or a recollection to which I have some attachment.
We're talking about how do experiences happen. So a sense meets the object. So the object might be a thought, it might be a memory. But which comes first, the senses or the objects? Michael.
The senses come first, because before the senses, there's nothing.
The senses come first. How do you know about the senses?
I experience them.
How?
How
do you know, for example, that you're smelling?
I notice it.
How?
My attention goes.
How do you know you're smelling? How do you know you're smelling? How do you know you're seeing?
I just know that I can see. I just know that I can.
How do you know? How do you know you are smelling? How do you know you're seeing? How do you know you're touching? How do you know you're tasting?
I'm perceiving it. That's not what you're asking, though. Yeah.
Well, it is. No, I'm not, but explore more.
Okay.
So how do you know about a sense, any sense? How do you know? Monica?
Something external out there has to meet my senses for me to know that I have my senses.
So the senses have to meet an object, yes?
Yes, if your question is what happens first, it's the object. Can it happen simultaneously? Can I just like it happens at the same time?
Think about it. Think about it for a moment. Yes. So think about it. What comes first?
So
does one come first, senses or objects? So how do you know about the senses?
I know about my senses because of the object. Like the flower, I'm picking a flower, I put it to my nose, and I smell the flower.
So we know about the senses because of the objects. Do the senses come first? Do the objects come first? What do you know?
Well, that's not a fair question. It's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Who knows?
So think. So rather than saying, this is what.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm just joking around. I'm joking around. I'm
so we're exploring. So these are really. So right now we're using freedom of thought. This is freedom of thought.
I don't know what came first. I don't know.
Right, Kathy. You don't know, Kathy. Oh, Kathy.
What happens if it's arising simultaneously? Like if we're aware of an object because of our senses and the object is there. Does that make sense?
Well, so then here you have the objects, here you have the senses. Yes. So if you're just listening to the recording, I'm holding my two fists up. Yes. So the senses meet their objects. Can you have the senses without the objects?
No.
Can you have the objects without the senses?
I don't know.
Well, just be with
Maybe
it.
not. It wouldn't be there. It wouldn't be in our awareness.
Stop. So when I'm asking these questions, this is a thing to do. If your mind goes blank, you enjoy it. You just be with it, right? So these are very internal questions. So stay inside right now. So when I ask, what comes first, the senses or the objects? Or does one come first or the other come first? Do the senses exist without their objects? Do the objects exist without their senses? So just breathe. So just sit quietly for a moment. I have to say to my patients, so just sit quietly and be with that, all of you. So these are different questions, yes? These are questions about things that happen in every second, the senses meeting their objects. So when you hear such questions, and your mind goes quiet, then you've asked a helpful question. Then you've asked a question that cuts through. And it doesn't take any effort. It just takes curiosity and exploration. Yeah. So these are maybe not exactly those questions that a child would ask, but you know, children ask very simple, straightforward questions. And this is what we've forgotten how to do. Yeah. So freedom of the thought comes when we ask simple questions. A second. Freedom of thought comes when we ask simple questions. Open your legs. Okay. All right. Sorry. When we ask questions that don't assume. And the simplest way is to begin right at the beginning with the very, very simple things we know, like experiencing and thinking. Yeah, so if you could just spend one day, just explore the sense of seeing. Yeah. And just notice senses, the sense of seeing meeting the object. Experience what that is. See what questions come. So self-inquiry is really inquiring, what is this humanness? What is it to be human? And the only goal is, we might say is a goal, is to just cut through the idea, I know something at all. And whenever we do that, that little puppy mind, it calms down. Yes, because there's nothing wrong with our mind. It's not deliberately dragging us around. It's just never received any training that guided it. Yes. And the puppy mind, the hand-me-down mind, is just a very, very, very tiny little fraction of the mind. But it seems to us it's everything. Yes. But it's a tiny little fraction. But we have the capacity to use the mind. Hang on a second. No, you have to stay in bed. Sorry. I'll just sit here for a moment. Excuse me. All right, hold my hand. So we have the capacity to use our minds. It doesn't require a lot of intelligence. It just requires being gentle and kind to ourselves. And so much of the time, the hand-me-down mind, isn't it? It's always trying to achieve and get somewhere and become something and get rid of something. So what we do in breakthrough and in all of this, in self-inquiry, is just to see what's there and look at it again and look at it again. But doing it from a place of curiosity, yes? Not judging it, just, do I really know anything about this? Yeah. And this life is really, really hard, and it's such a struggle, and then it's over. Yeah. And in between, we spend so much time making these big demands of ourselves. Yeah. Okay, all right. So when we ask those questions and we start to discover, oh, it seems I know less and less than I thought I did. Yeah. More and more compassion comes, And it's that compassion, it does all the work. There's no efforting to it. Because the whole being calms. So, I had lots of puppies in my life, and I loved Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer, and how he would say, so you just, you have to be like Cleopatra, and then your puppy will immediately, in his, these quite erratic little dogs would suddenly sit with him. Yes. He says, so where you're at, it just calms your little puppy. So same thing, when compassion bubbles up in us, the puppy mind, the hand-me-down mind, it automatically calms, yes? Because it's looking to serve us, just like a little puppy, little dog. Because when they can serve us, when they know how to serve us, then they calm. Yeah? So the mind's the same. Its role is to serve us. It's just never been trained that way. Yeah? And we were trained from children that the mind is something we have to improve on. And it's like my father saying, always keep your mind busy. And I thought, what the heck? And I went off in the forest and I sat there steeling myself to keep my mind busy. And it kept on getting distracted, and like any little child, and just not thinking. Yeah. And I told him, I saw him recently in 96. I said, that's the worst thing you ever told me. So keep your mind busy. So, but when we start to explore the tiny little things we do know about our human, or think we know about our humanness, a compassion bubbles up, and also a little bit of surprise. It's like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about my senses and how they began, and how they even function, or how does experiencing happen? See? So here already there's a little freedom of thinking happening, no? Yeah. What makes it free? What makes that kind of thinking free? Michael.
Freedom of thinking comes when asking simple questions.
Yeah, that don't assume. Yes.
Yes.
That don't
That's the hard
assume.
part. You don't know when you're assuming.
Oh, yes, you do. You just have to get used to looking, you know?
Yeah.
So I know I assume when I go on Google and say, what are the health benefits of ice cream? Yes. So I know I'm assuming because I really want them to be health benefits, no?
Yeah.
And much of the time, yes, and much of the time we ask questions with assumptions because our hand-me-down mind is full of, this is how it is, I know something. And the very idea that I don't know something, for many of us, is that means I'm stupid. Yeah, I have to be intelligent, and I only ask questions that I think I know the answer to. So we're programmed in how to ask poor questions. You know?
Yeah.
So it's like we have this hand-me-down mess. You know, we've inherited, all of us, all around the world, doesn't matter who we are. Yeah. So that already, have a little compassion. It's like, okay, so now, gosh, freedom of thinking will come if I learn how to ask a simple question. Yeah. So there's something to explore. You see, so already that's interesting though. Yeah. And really just thought maybe it could be that simple. Yeah. It won't be. Bevan, you had a question.
I have released most of what that line of thinking was to receive the new line of thinking, but it was more along the knowing that I am not this body and knowing that I am the being that resides connected to this body and gets to engage with the capacities of this body, that it was along the lines of,
so sweetie, relax, just let it sink in. So be careful, because the mind will want to come over and make a lot of explanations. So this isn't
really,
it's more a sensation in the body. Yes. So
I'm in my body and I'm actually just asking my body to tell me what the sensation is, because I've been here for, what it was along the lines of the fact that I can feel and I have senses outside of my body, and I have engaged with those senses more than the senses in my body in a way that is wholly receiving of messages, rather than being in thought. Being more in the heart and more in the body allows me to receive.
Yes, but all of that is also your mind just telling you need to be more of something or less of something. So just breathe, and let your nervous system just synthesize. Yeah. Just breathe. Just breathe. Right. How does breathing even happen? Yeah. How does breathing even happen? Monica.
I was thinking still of the question of what comes first. And I don't know if something comes first, but I discovered, or I don't like these words, but there's like a relationship that happens with my environment. It feels like a relatedness. I don't know if it's I don't know.
So don't stress.
Yeah.
So these, if your mind, Monica, so if the mind doesn't have an answer, don't go looking
for one.
So when you ask a simple question, the trick is, if the mind goes quiet, don't go running around. Right? If you ask a simple question, it cuts through I got to have an answer. This isn't about finding answers.
No.
This is more about just asking questions. And if you ask questions that calm the mind, then you might find the
Something
clearer
new
your
that
questions
comes up.
are, that another question will come. So what actually happens is another question, not answers. Okay? So what we discover is less and less answers and more questions, which is totally alien to the hand-me-down mind. So what happens to the hand-me-down mind?
It quiets down.
And
it quiet.
Like, what the heck? Yes, it quiets down. So it's never been doing anything wrong. It's just never been trained. And now we're finding a way of training it. It's really simple. Yeah. Okay, just a second. All right, hang on. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, is it making sense? Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's a different way. So most of the spiritual pathways, there are wonderful spiritual pathways, of course, there are 4, 5, but most of them are designed to, they involve disciplines, rituals and things, and to a degree, of course, this feels like a discipline in the beginning. But it's a little bit more fun, I think. Huh? Yeah, so it's more like using our mind like a child. And it's done with kindness, yes. So it's done with curiosity. Mm-hmm. And it's not looking to get anywhere. It's just very experiential. Oh, so my mind is functioning a different way now. Yeah. So this idea of enlightenment and waking up and being, guru or something, yeah, these are all just puppy mind stuff. Yes. Mm-hmm. It's like I'm going to be a CEO, or I'm going to be a guru, or I'm going to be president. It's all puppy mind stuff. Yeah. But the child knows, hey, I'm here. I don't need to be anybody special until they're taught otherwise. Mm-hmm. Right. So this is what, isn't it? Basically, we just want to come home to ourselves. As teeny weeny little children, even in the most hostile environments, we have some kind of memory, don't you? We have some kind of memory that somehow or other we were there despite the worst possible surroundings and situations, and somehow or other we were in like a magical place, no? Yeah. Where we were totally engaged with everything. Life was fascinating. Yeah. So why has life stopped being fascinating? Or why do we have to go and find something that fascinates us? Why can't just washing a dish be totally fascinating? Yeah. So why would any moment be wasted? So, I mean, I'm here in a situation here watching this, right in between beginning and end of life here. And when we're in those very last moments of life, what's it all about? So, why would we waste any time? So freedom of thought surely is about coming back to that place we knew when we were little children, where thoughts weren't the enemy. Yeah? And where we had thoughts about all kinds of things. Yeah? Sometimes we had angry thoughts, and sometimes we had nice thoughts, but we didn't feel as if our thoughts were dragging us around, did we? Yeah, it was different. Yeah, and there wasn't anything perfect about our thinking, and our thinking didn't have to disappear when we were little children. Michael.
Yes, the one thing that keeps coming up is when I was a kid, I was just living my life, but then my father comes along and says, you need to have a goal, a purpose. And then I was like, oh no, now I can't live my life anymore. Now I have to be all worried about this goal thing, and you might not get it, you might get it. So it's all this responsibility and goal stuff. So
Yes, but you think of little children, you know, tiny, tiny little children. I mean, we see them on TV all the time in war-torn places and places where there's, we see tiny little children who have tremendous responsibility, don't we? I've seen them in India, you know, having to look after tiny little siblings, protect them from rats. And so it's not that children don't have responsibilities, is it?
No.
Yes, we do, and oftentimes, or we're in maybe with parents we're having to look after or parent themselves, and so it's not the children are void of responsibility, is it?
No.
So
It's
what
that
is
there's a goal.
right?
It's like
But
now
what
you have
is
a goal.
But what is this idea of responsibility? What is it?
It's all these things you have to do.
Yeah, all these things we have to do. Yeah, and yet, so here we're born, here we die, and in between we have lots of things to do. What makes one thing we do responsibility and the other not? No? I mean, it's just a name we put to actions, isn't it?
Yes.
Really, when we look at, yeah, responsibility is a name we put to actions that makes all actions feel like a big drag. Yes.
Yes.
And then when we put fun to actions, then we enjoy them. Isn't it amazing, the power of words? Yeah. Yeah. And so that's also somewhat we do in breakthroughs. It's exploring words we use, just simple words. You know, so what do we really mean? You know, and we find that we have all these different, totally contradictory meanings in our connotations. So again and again, just coming back to exploring in simple questions. What am I really saying? So it's not an analysis at all, is it? It's not analysis. Yes, so Nova, you have a question.
My question is, what is happening to us, having this puppy mind or having a goal-oriented mind, this is being implanted to us as children in our schools. That is just my opinion, because in school we are taught to have, you should get good grades, something like that. Your parents tell you should get good grades, so you have scholarships, etc., etc. These are being programmed to us as children in school, at home. So as we grow up, we this what do you call this? This freedom of mind. It's bullying. I mean, we are being bullied by our own minds.
Yeah,
That's
so
how
we
I
have
see
the
it.
internal bully, and we look, we see them outside. We have the internal dictator, and we see them outside. Yes, but everything out there is really just a reflection of our own relationship with the mind. So how we respond to out there is our reflection, is our relationship with our
Now I understand. Now I understand. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
So you have a question, Karen?
To me, responsibility was perhaps weighted, and then I changed the word to the ability to respond. The changes can be perhaps back to the child or back to the child in a difficult situation.
But that's the trouble, is that we think, well, then I'm gonna use a better word, or we think so, or we're going to think more positively, but we can't do that. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a puppy, you know, so it's not going to do anything. So it's not about censoring. It's just another form of censorship, isn't it? Power of positive thinking is just another form of censorship.
Yeah,
just another way of trying to control the mind. So it's looking at, so do I even need those words? Yes,
Yeah.
really.
Because the ability to respond is simply without words, living in the present moment and doing what has to be done.
Yes, yeah. So it's looking at, so what is impeding that? Questioning that.
Nothing has to impede it. But if we think it's a
And
responsibility.
yet that's our experience, yes? Just a second, Ben, can you take for a second? Are you-
Well, I guess I'll ask Terry Ann, who's one of the senior breakthrough instructor, or Caroline, if you have anything. Nothing's coming to mind for me to interject at this time. If either of you have something that you want to comment about.
Just an imagery of what, oh, Esther's back, but I was just thinking of, the moment the senses meet the object, or the moment I'm in the zone, as Michael mentioned. The image of being by the ocean and digging out, the sand, and then the wave comes and fills it up instantaneously. And every time we think, well, if I think positively, that little hole will remain empty. But it doesn't. It's constantly being filled up. And these questions in this moment where, oh, I've asked a question and now my mind is blank. Then whether that hole is full or whether it's empty doesn't really matter. Anyway, that was my sense of what's going on for me, and experiencing everything everyone said. By the way, thank you. Because one of the freedom of thought at one point came to me as, oh, it's my unbridled curiosity. And then I thought, would a child understand that? And then I went, yes, I read so many books about unbridled something or other. And that had a huge impact. I've been quite quiet during this hour and 48 minutes. And I thought, wow, that was brand new. And so I want to thank all of you, because you brought that to my gut brain. And then from then on, I was blank. I just saw images. So thank you all. Esther, you're muted.
Yeah, I muted you, Esther, while you were taking care.
I'm so sorry. I have a patient here that so I'm a little bit distracted. So yes, so sense what's happening in your nervous systems right now. So my hope was just, I hoped to be able to be a little more focused for you today, but my hope was in doing this today, just to sow the seed of, simplicity, that, we have so many weighty ideas about how we need to be in life. And really, life began very, very simply. And then it got more and more and more complicated, yes? And we look in the world out there and we can see that reflected, that actually all the things designed to make our lives more simple actually seem to have made them more hectic, more complicated, more complex, in many ways. Yeah. And so we see that the better, bigger and better and more complex and more wonderful, and somehow or other, it's like life doesn't get simpler because we're doing all those things. How is that? So in our own minds, we do have a freedom. We do have a possibility. So, much of my work came actually from a time when I was struggling with PTSD. So my mind was just absolutely in the shower all day long, go, make it stop, where my thoughts were just, and it was the greatest gift, because it really forced me, my mind forced me to find another way. And it was the most simple questions to start to ask. So anytime any of the inner chatter in any way tells us we need to be efforting, or we need to be a particular way, then we know probably that's not the voice to be listening to. Yes. But anytime we're filled with curiosity, we're fascinated by just something little, then no, probably we're on the right track. So a couple of you have talked about being in the zone. And even that, it just seems like, well, now then I'd be like Michael Jackson, or no. But really, aren't we describing where we were when we were little children? So this is, to me, this is what self-inquiry is. And it's coming home to that which is most natural prior to I am this, I am that, I'm not enough, I need to be more. So it's not that we need to become anything. Yeah, it's just that there's too much, and we think it's all necessary. And who we think we are and who we think we should become has become one big complicated mess. Yes, and much of the time we're hurting in different ways. If we're really honest with ourselves, we're not kind to ourselves. We don't take time for ourselves. And we think being nice to ourselves is having a bubble bath or taking an hour off. But it's really being here and curious about ourselves. That's the kindness. So what do you really need right now? You know, what would really fulfill you right now? So when we're in that place we call the zone, but when we're in that more natural place, what happens to neediness? And to our fears, and to, so they're not there. So it's not anything that we don't know about already. So we all get glimpses of this place that's so natural to us. But to live in that all the time requires us asking ourselves questions about the clutter, questions about the complicated life. Yes. And beginning with the really simple things about our daily experience. So I hope this was in some way catalyzed some thinking for you. You have a question, Nova?
It's not really a question, but maybe it's a question, because if breakthrough, or this freedom from thought, is being curious means exploring, asking simple questions, and experiencing. It's the opposite of body talk, because the charts of body talk is complicated, memorizing everything. It's just
it's different. It's a good
yes, it's opposite. The parama, there are so many charts, there's so many things to look at. It's the opposite. The breakthrough is, I think, is the opposite of body talk. Two different things.
Not actually. It's not at all. It's very much in line. You see, so in breakthrough, we have protocols. We have a very strong protocol in breakthrough. Not so many, not so huge, but it's a very strong protocol when we do questioning. And so what is the benefit of that's something, I would love that we do just one focus on the power of protocol, because the power of protocol, we've been talking about the puppy mind, the hand-me-down mind. That's what the protocol is for, because the protocol gives you, like, it's like the scaffolding on a building or the parameters. It gives the puppy mind something stable. Yes, it gives it stability. And when you have that stability of a protocol, then the curious mind can function more freely. So the hand-me-down mind, it needs certain protocols, not hand-me-down, this is how it is, but they're very carefully designed protocols. And in BodyTalk, you ask very clear, specific questions that do not contain an assumption. You look at all your protocols in BodyTalk. I could be wrong. I'm John's worst student, but to me, none of them contain an assumption. Yes.
Okay.
So it's very, very, very much about training the mind. But there's been a lot of misunderstanding, breakthrough by body talkers all the years. And I highly want to encourage you right now, because if you ever want your body talk to go to the depth that John designed it for, you need to be doing breakthrough type of thinking, because it's specific, it's the underpinning of body talk. It came before body talk. And I mean, Ben is probably, of everyone, Ben teaches breakthrough, and so did Terry Ann, but Ben teaches, very much all the advanced courses of body talk, always drawing the parallels. Why breakthrough and body talk go hand in hand? Because it's, do you really think that body talk is about just fixing things? Of course it's not. It's not if you're a body talker. Yes. Don't you think it includes the mind as well? But as John himself would say, body talk can do just so much. And then you do need to do some work. You do need to do this work with the mind. So they were designed to go together. It's because body talk is such a huge, huge thing. And breakthrough doesn't appear to be. Breakthrough is a very complex, vast system, because the mind is vast, yes? So we could go anywhere, all over the place with breakthrough too, yes? But we keep it very simple, to a very simple protocol. And from there, we just work, and we go with one simple protocol, and we just go deeper, and deeper, and deeper. Yeah? Then you have something to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, the one thing that was just coming to mind to say was along the lines of the idea of a protocol, and that's the part of my sense for a protocol is that it also helps to provide that sense of, as both with regards to, I guess, as a practitioner, someone leading, either facilitating a body talk session or leading someone through the breakthrough steps, but also from the perspective of someone that's being led through the steps. Part of the function, to me, it seems, of a protocol, in addition to providing that structure and that framework, is that it provides this sense of safety and security. And so then that whole experience, experience of letting go and not efforting just happens because I know I'm always being held, I'm always being supported by the structure of the protocol, whether I'm someone that's being led through a breakthrough steps because I'm familiar with the process. So I know that, it's carrying me. I don't have to effort. I don't have to struggle in any way. And the same as a practitioner. But then, as you mentioned, I'm constantly seeing the interplay of body talk and breakthrough in my body talk sessions and when and when we're in the breakthrough classes that you offer weekly, the steps intensive, constantly seeing like, oh, there it is again, the CGRE plug-in procedure, all the reevaluate. I mean, I could go on and on. One of these days, maybe I'll have a class.
Will. So the next time we'll do a class, our next free class, we're going to do that. We're going to do about this connection, body talk and breakthrough, because it's a real misconception body talkers have. And that's why your practices go to a certain point and then you won't go any further. Yeah. So it's to take the work deeper, and it's to give you more freedom in your practice and a much broader practice. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ben, so much. Sharon, we're going to finish in a second. So you have a question?
I was just reflecting for myself about when that freedom of thought occurs, and it seems to be that it would be when I'm happy or joyful. And but then I was thinking, but can that also happen if a person's like sad, or is there like no emotion connected to this?
Isn't that such a good question too? Because don't we think they're good and bad emotions, and most of the hand-me-down mind is all about, aiming for particular experiences, isn't it? We want particular experiences because we only want to feel certain things. And yet you look at a little child and they feel the whole richness and gamut of all the emotions, and they'll feel rage, and then it's like switching a tap off, and then they're going off and they're doing something else. So they experience fully. Whereas what happens with us is we have the senses meet their objects and the body responds. That's normal. That's what happens in a child. And there are emotions, the body has sensations, whatever happens. Yes, and they come and they go and come and go. But in us as adults, because the puppy mind's just, hand-me-down mind's just got us by the throat, what happens is senses meet the objects, and as the body starts to respond, the mind immediately says, now I'm depressed. Now I'm happy. Now it gives a constant commentary. And much of the time, what is actually being experienced and what the mind is telling us our experiences are two very different things. So we're actually, as long as we are being dragged around and don't start doing self-inquiry in some way, then we're constantly living only on the surface of our lives, wanting to experience only certain emotions. And what does that resemble? If we only experience, instead of the ups and downs of life, we only experience certain experience, flatlining, no? So the hand-me-down mind aims for flatlining. That's what it's doing, basically. And so we live life living on the surface of our emotions and feelings, yes, avoiding life. So the hand-me-down mind is basically designed to protect us from life. So it's, it's often, it's programming that comes from a place of fear. Yes. So a parent wanting to protect the child from a place of fear through the generations. And so it's really anti-life. But we're right in the end, so I'm like going really fast. But yeah, so what we're looking for is, yes, so why aren't I here fully? And what would be wrong with experiencing this emotion fully? See, and when we experience an emotion fully, it has a beginning and an end, yes? But when our mind is translating the emotion for us, interpreting the emotion for us, I'm depressed. And then it goes on and on and on, because it's saying the emotion is my emotion and it represents me. And now I'm an angry person. Now I'm a sad person. Now I'm a happy person. And now I'm, yes, going to tell everyone I'm a happy person. See, even our emotions, they're identities. Yeah? Whereas as children, we didn't give a damn. Yeah, our emotions, we felt them. Yes. So as we start to use the mind with simple questions, we start also to experience our emotions more fully. And it's quite wonderful. And it's totally inappropriate sometimes. Yeah? So we start discovering the joy of inappropriate. Yeah? And that so often we need that just to counteract all the responsible. Yes. Mm-hmm. So the work in breakthrough, it's really, I said this the other day, I was in an interview, I mean, the wonderful book of Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. And I thought, well, if I wrote another book, I'd call it The Power of Ambiguity. Ambiguity, yes. So it's nothing clear cut and black and white. Yes, which is what the hand-me-down mind is all about. Everything has to be black and white. This is how it is. Yeah, this is because if it's not, it's the most powerful thing someone said to me the other day. But yes, the hand-me-down mind is all black and white thinking. But if it's black and white, then doesn't that keep me safe? And in those powerful words, with that powerful insight, she summed up why we are slaves to the hand-me-down mind. Because we confuse it with safety. We confuse black and white with safety. Yes. And yet life is so many shades of all different colors, yes, and shades of gray. And we think life is the scary place. Yeah. But while we're slaves to this black and white thinking, is there anything more scary? Could things get any worse? Yeah. Because it deprives us of adventure, no? And of maybe falling on our faces, maybe, experiencing something awful, maybe something wonderful. Yeah. So basically that's it. Breakthrough is coming back to the inappropriate. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The spontaneous, the maybe totally imperfect, but something very, very human. Because for goodness sake, life is so short. And we're human after all. We're never going to be anything but human while we're in this life. And that's the thing we're trying to avoid all the time. Yeah. And you've been wonderful sitting here. I'm in the most human of situations here. Yeah, with somebody who's ill right now. And it makes me so aware of just the fragility of life. We don't have time to waste. We don't have time. Yeah. Ask simple questions. Yeah. Be really, really kind to yourself, gentle. Yeah. That's the essence of breakthrough. Yeah. That's why it's so key. If you want to be a good body talk practitioner, yeah, it will bring to your practice some magic that you haven't experienced before. Yeah. Because you go in there that much more human. Mm-hmm. Don't you know that when we experience our humanity, in those moments when we're vulnerable, feeling very human, isn't it so much easier to see the human in everybody, even the worst seeming person? Yeah. Thank you so much. You've been very patient and wonderful.